Most of what sits in a modern refrigerator tonight would not have been called dinner 50 years ago in kitchens like ours. A skillet of bread fried in drippings, a pot of beans built from a bone everyone else had finished with, a bowl of cornmeal that served supper one night and breakfast the next morning without apology. We did not call any of it poverty. We called it Thursday. Before this list is finished, you will hear about a dinner made from bread soaked in milk, a salad pulled from the yard, and a soup that fed 200 people from the simplest ingredients a farm could produce. Stay until number 1. It changed how I think about every table I have ever sat at. Number 12. Fried bread and drippings, supper. The tin of drippings sat beside the stove the way a jar of salt sits in a modern kitchen. Assumed, always there, always useful. When bread had gone stale and the week's money was spent, you sliced that bread thick and laid it in the drippings until the edges turned deep gold and the center soaked through with something smoky and rich. You put it on the table with warm broth or a cup of milk, and that was supper. We did not call it poverty food. We called it supper, and nobody sat down with shame about it. The bread that would have been wasted became the meal. The fat saved from morning bacon became the cooking. Children ate quickly, the kitchen smelled good, and nothing was thrown away. It is not complicated. What is complicated is explaining to a modern cook why something that simple was enough and why it worked better than it sounds. People pay restaurant prices now for bread fried in good fat. In the 1950s, putting it on the table meant the week had been lean. The food did not change. What changed was who was willing to admit they needed it. Number 11. Potato soup with nothing extra. The cellar always had potatoes longer than it had anything else. When February stretched out and the next payday felt far away, a handful of potatoes and an onion went into a heavy pot with butter and flour and whatever milk was available. No cream, no toppings, no garnish, just soup, thick and pale yellow with bread alongside to finish the bowl. My mother made this when the cellar still had potatoes and not much else. She did not apologize for it. She set it on the table and 10 people ate until they were full. Skill made that possible, not money. The potatoes needed to be cut small enough to cook evenly. The flour had to thicken without lumping. The milk went in at the end so it would not scorch. None of that required a store. Canned soup eventually replaced the pot. Then plain became something people were embarrassed by instead of grateful for. Now the same dish sells in restaurants under words like rustic and farmhouse. You cannot improve a thing by making it more complicated when the simple version already worked. Number 10. Cornmeal mush supper. A good cook plans forward. When cornmeal mush came off the stove, thick enough that the spoon stood up in it, she did not serve only what the family needed that night. She poured the rest into a loaf pan and set it somewhere cold. The next morning, it was sliced and laid in a hot skillet until the outside crisped and the inside turned custardy. 1 pot, 2 meals, 2 days fed. We made this for supper because we knew it would still be working the next morning. Coarse cornmeal was cheap and kept. It was filling enough to replace meat on the nights when there was none. It asked very little of the kitchen: water, salt, time, a steady hand on the spoon. In Pennsylvania, Dutch homes and across much of the rural Midwest, cornmeal mush was ordinary in the way bread was ordinary. Present, reliable, not celebrated. Polenta now appears on menus with olive oil poured over it and a price worth noticing. That is the same food. The difference is that the earlier version was made because it worked, not because it was fashionable. Processed breakfast cereals arrived, and the habit of cooking cornmeal from scratch faded. The meal that saved you money at supper was already planning to save your morning too. Convenience did not just replace the cooking. It replaced knowing what yesterday's meal still owed you. Number 9. Navy bean and ham bone soup. Sunday ham fed the family at dinner. By Tuesday, the picked clean bone had a second job. Dried navy beans soaked overnight went into a pot with that bone and an onion and cold water, and they simmered on the back burner while the morning's work happened. By noon, the broth had turned deep brown and smoky. The beans had gone soft enough to press with a spoon, and the house smelled more of meat than the bone could reasonably explain. We boiled the ham for Sunday dinner. By Tuesday, the bone had made us a second meal. Dried beans stored through winter without any difficulty. The bone cost nothing beyond the ham already purchased. The soup required almost no attention once it was going. This was not clever so much as it was obvious. To a kitchen that understood nothing left the pot without finishing its work. Boneless hams made the bone unfamiliar. Canned soups made the long simmer unnecessary. Families stopped planning meals in sequence and started planning them one at a time. The meal people threw away was still working when most families had already opened a can.
Number 8. Tomato gravy on biscuits.
In August, when the garden was full, jars went on the shelf. In February, when the garden was frozen memory, those jars fed supper. Tomatoes cooked down with a spoon of bacon fat and thickened with flour made a gravy that was sharp and slightly sweet, red-orange and rich, poured over split biscuits until they softened underneath and soaked it through. People think gravy needs meat. They learned that from someone who had more than we did. The biscuits took flour, lard, and buttermilk. The gravy took tomatoes already put up and fat already saved.
Total cost was almost nothing.
But the decision behind the meal had been made in August, standing over a canning kettle, lifting hot jars out with a cloth. The supper in February was proof the decision had been right. When supermarkets began selling tomatoes in winter, the canning logic disappeared. Biscuit making became less common.
Tomato gravy without meat confused people
who expected the word gravy to mean something brown and meaty. Every jar on that shelf was a decision made in August. The supper in February was the proof it worked. Number 7. Fried salt pork and milk gravy. Come March, the smokehouse was doing what November had asked it to do. Salt pork fried up in a cast iron pan, the fat
rendering out slowly until the edges went crisp and the kitchen filled with something between smoke and salt. The drippings stayed in the pit in the pan.
Milk went in, then a dusting of flour, and the whole thing thickened pale and ivory and rich enough to make potatoes into a full meal. Salt pork was not a delicacy. It was the thing in the smokehouse that lasted when fresh meat was long gone. November's butchering was feeding the family in March. The preservation had worked. The family ate well without visiting a store. Refrigeration eventually made salt curing feel unnecessary. Supermarket pork became easier to find and easier to overlook as a cut worth knowing. Fat-based cooking lost its place in the kitchen. The smokehouse outside the door became a thing to photograph rather than use. The smokehouse and November's work were still feeding us when the snow came back in March. A heavy supper was not indulgence when the body had been working since 5 in the morning and still had evening chores ahead. Number 6. Egg and potato hash, made from yesterday's supper. The potatoes from Monday became Tuesday's whole meal. Nothing sat in the icebox without a plan. Cold boiled potatoes went into a hot skillet with diced onion and butter, crisping on the outside before the egg went in and was scrambled through. The edges caught and turned brown. Steam came up sharp. The whole thing took 15 minutes and required nothing that had not already been cooked the day before. That planning was invisible. Nobody announced it. The cook had simply put more potatoes in the pot the night before than Monday needed, knowing Tuesday was coming. That forethought is now called a brunch item and priced accordingly on restaurant menus. Then it was called Tuesday. Smaller families meant less cooking in quantity. Buying exactly what the recipe needed replaced buying ahead. Leftovers began to feel like failure rather than strategy. She was not making dinner. She was finishing a plan she started the night before.
Number 5. Ribbles in broth flour, 1 egg, a pinch of salt.
You rub them together between your palms until the dough breaks into rough, uneven pieces the size of small peas. You drop them into simmering broth and wait. They go in pale and raw and come out soft and slightly chewy, and the broth thickens just a little from the flour. That is a ribble soup. Ribbles are not noodles and not dumplings. They are what a cook makes when she has flour, an egg, and hungry people. This is Pennsylvania Dutch, cooking in its plainest, most practical form. Mennonite and non-plain families made it too. It was not unique to any single community, but it was carried carefully in the kitchens that never stopped needing it. Canned soup replaced the scratch broth. The technique of rubbing the dough by hand was never written in a way that survived without someone standing next to you showing you how it felt. A recipe card can list every ingredient and still not teach you what the cook's hands knew. You cannot learn this from a card. You have to watch someone's hands doing it. Number 4. Bread and milk supper. Some nights, late in the week, there was nothing left to cook. Bread torn into a bowl, warm milk poured over it, a pinch of salt or sometimes a small spoon of sugar or a pour of molasses if the family preferred it that way. You ate it with a spoon and it was supper. People raise an eyebrow at that now. At the time, nobody thought twice. Warm bread and milk filled the bowl and filled the person. This meal crossed purposes without asking permission. It was sick day food. It was the meal given to a child when the adults were still outside working. It was what you made on a Friday when the week's food had honestly run out. The same bowl appeared in illness and in ordinary life, in lean months and in simply tired ones. Fresh milk was always available in homes like ours. Bread was baked regularly. The meal required no fire worth speaking of, no new purchase, no real decision. The simplest thing in the kitchen sometimes required the most honesty about what you had and what you needed. Number 3, dandelion greens with hot bacon. Dressing. Every April, before anything from the garden was ready, the field gave us greens. The dandelion leaves had to be small and still tender. Once they had grown tall and tough, the bitterness outweighed the purpose. You picked them early, washed them, and brought them in. Bacon went into the pan. Cider vinegar followed the fat. A small spoon of sugar cut the sharpness. You poured the hot dressing over the leaves, and they wilted where it touched them, the whole bowl going from raw to warm and bright. We did not go to the store. We went to the yard. This was not a recipe invented for taste alone. In April, after a long winter with little fresh food, greens from the field carried real nutritional weight. Pennsylvania Dutch and German-American kitchens had kept this habit from older European traditions, and Appalachian families made similar versions. It was not exclusively Amish food, but it was the kind of food that survived where people still paid attention to what was growing. Now the dandelions are killed before they can be used. The spring hunger gap that made them necessary is gone. The season told you what to eat. When you stopped listening to the season, someone else decided for you, and they charged you for it.
Number 2, cornbread and buttermilk.
July evenings were too hot to fire the stove a second time. The cornbread was left from the morning. The buttermilk was cold. You crumbled the bread into a bowl or a tall glass and poured the buttermilk over it and ate it with a spoon. It was sour and slightly grainy and cool and filling enough to end a long day properly. This was supper, not a snack, not a side, the whole meal. In some Amish communities in Ohio and Indiana, and across many Appalachian and Southern households, this was as natural as the evening itself. The buttermilk in those kitchens was not a baking ingredient purchased in a carton. It came from the churn as a matter of course. The cornbread had already been made. There was nothing left to do but eat. Buttermilk became something people bought only when a recipe demanded it. Cornbread became a side dish rather than a staple. The idea of eating leftovers deliberately, as a complete evening meal with no apology, faded with the routines that had made it sensible. You think this is simple. It is, but simple and poor are not the same word, and the people who ate this would like you to understand the difference. None of these meals failed. The world around them changed until the meals no longer fit, and most families let them go without writing anything down. Number 1, church supper bean, soup with homemade bread.
This was not a recipe, it was a system.
After Sunday worship, the benches were rearranged and the long tables went down, and every woman knew what she had brought and where it was going. Navy beans had simmered with smoked ham hock since the day before. Bread had been baked Saturday and wrapped in clean cloth. In many Lancaster area communities, a spread made from peanut butter, butter, and molasses appeared alongside, sweet and plain and passed without ceremony. 200 people ate the same meal from the same pots. The soup was thin enough to ladle into cups. The bread came in thick slices, still soft inside. Nobody asked whether it was fancy. It was not made to be fancy. It was made to feed everyone who had just sat together for 3 hours and had a long drive home. This is the most poor man dish on this entire list, and it is also the most socially complex. It required a rotating schedule of host families, a coordinated list of who brought what, a kitchen large enough to manage the quantities, and the quiet understanding among many women that the food had to come out right every single time. Not because anyone would praise it, but because the people eating it were counting on it. Church potlucks exist now, but they are not the same thing. A potluck is individuals bringing individual dishes. This was a district feeding itself as a coordinated act. That system still runs in many Amish communities. The food stayed simple because it had to serve everyone equally, and because simplicity was the point. The beans were cheap. The bread cost almost nothing, but the table was never empty and nobody ate alone. If your mother or grandmother made something from this list, or something that belonged here and didn't make it, leave it in the comments. If there was a dish in your family that never had a name,
or a recipe that lived only in someone's hands and is now gone, I would like to hear about it.
Some of those meals deserve to be remembered. The wooden spoon is still resting across the pot. Someone always knew what to do with what was left.